On today's episode, I'll be talking about The Prestige, which is about magicians but is nowhere near as lame as you'd expect based on that.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance, or you're looking for the Luke with an old man or cold hands, creature of the night, heads for his spotlight, I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review, a method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. If you like listening to a guy talk about one unsystematically chosen movie at a time in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe. I use views as a substitute for nitrous oxide in my underground street racing career. So, as I mentioned, today's movie is The Prestige, which is based on the novel of the same name by Christopher Priest. The movie was released on October 20th, 2006, with a runtime of 130 minutes and a rating of PG-13, a budget of $40 million, directed, of course, by the great Christopher Nolan, with writers Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan. For the score, we have composer David Julian. For the cast, we have Christian Bale, who plays Alfred Borden. Hugh Jackman plays Robert Angier. Scarlett Johansson as Olivia Wenscombe. Michael Caine as Cutter. David Bowie as Tesla. And Andy Serkis as Allie. For casting notes, just one. Josh Hartnett actually expressed interest in getting the role of Robert Angier in the movie to director Christopher Nolan, but the part ultimately went to Hugh Jackman. For our plot synopsis, two rival 19th century magicians obsessively devote their lives to besting one another on stage. And we have an amazing tagline for this one. It is, "Are you watching closely?" And I think that's a really good one, and it actually embodies this movie very well. Alright, guys, let's just dive right into this motherfucking plot. So, this movie starts off with a shot of a bunch of top hats lying in the woods, and you hear Christian Bale ask, "Are you watching closely?" And for those of you who don't know what that means it's fucking on, and it also means pay the fuck attention, because if you don't, you're gonna be so fucking lost, even more than you already would be if you were paying attention. So it cuts to a bird in a cage, and Michael Caine's character, Cutter, explains the 3 steps or acts of a magic trick. So, first is the pledge, where the magician shows you something ordinary, like an object, and allows you to look at it to be sure nothing about it is unusual, and it almost always is unusual in a way that's not immediately detectable by the average person. The second act is called the turn, where the magician makes the object do something extraordinary, like disappearing or what have you. Then, of course, the key third step is the prestige, copyright 2006, where the magician has to satisfy the audience by bringing back the object or returning it to safety. This movie is a lot to take in. After Cutter explains the 3 acts of a trick, he is testifying at a trial that Bale's character, Alfred Borden, saw Hugh Jackman's character, Robert Angier, drowning in a glass tank of water after sneaking backstage at one of Angier's shows, and Borden is being tried for his murder. Cutter is explaining that he's struggling to give full testimony because explaining the full story would reveal the secret behind one of the most sought after tricks in the world. So Borden goes to jail, and a man named Owens approaches him to buy his tricks for £5,000 on behalf of his employer, Caldlow. Owens and Borden argue about a trick called the Transported Man, which Borden does not want to give up. Owens says that Borden's partner Fallon refused to sell him that one, and it's arguably the most valuable in all of the tricks, and he essentially says that he doesn't want to buy the tricks at all if they don't include the transported man. Borden says he can't sell the secret to his greatest trick, but Owens points out that although Borden's daughter is safe with his partner Fallon now, it appears likely that he will not be allowed to retain custody of her. Owens offers Borden Angier's diary as a show of good faith, which would likely detail his trip to Colorado, where he learned how to perform his version of the transported man, but Borden assures Owens that Angier never learned how to perform it the way Borden did, despite many accounts saying that Angier's version was actually superior in a lot of ways. Borden reads the diary in his cell, and we flash back to Angier on a train to Colorado. When he arrives in the town, he is shocked to find that the whole town has electricity, and at the hotel he asks to be taken up the mountain where a scientific experiment is going on. Angier is met at the electrified gate of the facility by a man named Ali, and Angier asks to arrange a meeting with a man named Tesla, but Ali says that this is impossible and no amount of money will make a difference in that. So Angier tells Ali that he will be staying at the hotel in town indefinitely in hopes that Tesla will reconsider. Then we get a time jump to a time before when Borden and Angier were friends. They are called to the stage at a magic show and are asked to tie a woman's hands before she's submerged in a water tank. This woman is actually Angier's wife, Julia. They are posing as members of the audience that are just volunteering and are not actually believed to be a part of the show, even though they are. It's just all part of the act. I would like to take a moment to just be clear. There are an absurd amount of time jumps in this film, and to actually articulate them all clearly, verbally, would be very tough for me. So I'm just going to tell you that there's a jump and try and explain as best I can what is going on and basically where in the timeline it is, kind of. But it's not like I could really explain. I'm not going to go through and say, this is timeline A, this is timeline B, this is timeline C. It's just very difficult to actually explain well. So anyway, Angier and Borden do their part with this magic trick, and when Julia is lowered down with a hoist and the tank is locked closed, a curtain hides the tank, and Cutter is backstage and starts a stopwatch while we're assuming Julia is untying and getting out of this water tank. Of course, before long, the curtain is pulled back up to reveal Julia outside the tank with no ropes tying her up anymore. Backstage, Borden complains to Cutter and Angier about how boring a lot of magic shows have become and how real magicians create new tricks or use more dangerous tricks like a bullet catch. But the seasoned Cutter shuts down the bullet catch idea because it can be dangerous. And I'm like, hold on, Cutter. I don't feel like that sounds particularly dangerous at all. I mean, sure, a bullet sounds bad by name, but all you have to do is catch it, bro. Calm the fuck down. But almost immediately, I find out that the trick is actually to catch a bullet fired from a gun, so I may have been a little off base on that one. Cutter begins chastising Borden for not tying his knot on Julia's hands correctly and how it could cause her to get injured if it comes undone and drops her while she's suspended as she's being lowered into the tank with the hoist. Borden pitches the idea of using a stronger knot, but Cutter says no because the knot he's considering using is not meant for use in water and could make it difficult for Julia to undo while she is submerged in the water. Julia insists that she could undo it if they practiced it enough, but Angier sides with Cutter and insists that they not try it. Eventually, Cutter suggests the two enthusiastic magicians go see a show where an Asian magician does a trick with a goldfish bowl. He wants them to figure out how the trick is pulled off. They go to this show, and it's actually a very simple seeming trick, but this very frail old guy walks up to an empty table and hides the table behind his cloak and slowly moves it around and pulls it up to reveal a big bowl of water with a goldfish in it. But the water isn't sloshing around or anything, and it fascinates the two magicians. They observe the Asian magician leaving the show later on, And Borden suggests that this entire demeanor and seemingly slow appearance that this man has is all an act that is constantly being put on in public to help make his act more convincing. Angier is trying to figure out the trick the same night in front of Julia before they go to bed, and he can't wrap his head around how even a full grown, able bodied dude could even do that at all, even with an empty bowl. We get a bit of exposition between the two of them that Angier agreed to go by an alias when he became a magician so he wouldn't embarrass his family with his magic acts, which is actually a pretty good call because that kind of sounds like it might disappoint or shame an entire family. These early scenes are interspersed with Borden and Angier reading each other's diaries at different points in the timeline, and it's a little confusing. But hey, I mean, if you aren't willing to admit some aspect of a Christopher Nolan movie is confusing, do you just think you're better than me or what? Borden is assisting at a small show and he catches the eyes of a woman in the audience named Sarah, played by Rebecca Hall, and she's with her young nephew. As the magician Borden is assisting does a disappearing trick with a bird in a cage by collapsing the cage, the boy with Sarah begins crying and she has to comfort him, but even when the magician reveals the bird again, the boy is still very upset. Borden goes up to the boy with the caged bird after the show to assure him the bird is fine, and the boy tearfully asks, "But where's his brother?" And Borden simply calls him a sharp boy and ignores the fact that the magician who performed the trick has fucking blood on his hands. Will this man not be tried for bird homicide? Anywho, after the show outside, Borden shows the boy how to do a trick with a coin and tells him never to reveal to anyone else how it's done because they will beg to know, but if he tells them, he will mean nothing to them from then on. Cutter shows Owens, who was actually the guy that was trying to buy the tricks from Borden at the beginning. He shows him Angier's machine after his death and explains that it was made by a wizard who can do real magic and that there is no trick to it and that it actually does what it's supposed to. He goes on to explain that someone put a real padlock on the tank Angier drowned in instead of a false one like are normally used in magic acts. We flash back again to them tying up Julia a different time on stage, and the whole setup is the same. But backstage, when Cutter's stopwatch runs out of time, he has to stop the show and reveal that Julia is still trapped in the tank and tied up, and he has to try and free her by breaking the tank with an axe. But unfortunately, Julia does die, and at her funeral, Cutter tells a story about a sailor who was thought drowned and came back to life after 5 minutes, who described the experience of drowning as like going home. Angier and Cutter both blame Borden for her death, and Angier confronts him at her funeral, and Borden claims he can't remember which knot he tied, which kind of feels like bullshit if I'm being totally honest. Shortly after, Borden finds out Sarah is pregnant, and despite being excited about it, I guess he feels like this is as good a time as any to show her a bullet catch trick. She gets kind of pissy with him when he won't tell her how the trick is done, and then she's not super gracious once he breaks down and tells her how it's done. She kind of acts like it's so simple and that she feels like an idiot for not realizing how simple it was. And this whole moment kind of captures why revealing the secret of tricks really sucks for magicians, because it gives them such a feeling of shittiness. He explains that it's actually a dangerous trick because there is no bullet in the gun for the trick, but if some wiseacre put a button or a penny or even a bullet in there, he could be seriously hurt. In this moment, Borden proceeds to tell her that he loves her, and I guess it doesn't ring true for her, and she tells him that some days he means it when he says he loves her, and other days he doesn't mean it for some reason, and she's not sure why, it's just she senses that about him when he says it at different times. Borden is doing a show later on, and the crowd is very hostile, and he goes to do the bullet catch trick to calm them down, and he asks for a volunteer. As Borden begins setting up the trick, he turns around to see that the volunteer was actually Angier in disguise, and he clearly has put a bullet in the gun with the intention to shoot Borden. Angier specifically asks Borden which knot he tied on Julia's hands on the night of her last show, and Borden claims he still doesn't know. Then Angier shoots him in the hand, and Borden cries out in anguish as the crowd laughs at the failed performance of the trick. Sarah is trying to treat Borden's wounded hand days after the incident, and she says that it looks as bad as the day it happened, which will make a lot more sense later, but in this moment, you don't really think much of that. You think she's just commenting on how bad the wound is. Borden assures her that he can still perform, but he will be limited on what tricks he can do with one hand injured. Cutter and Angier meet at a pub, and Cutter explains that he has taken a great deal of blame for the accident with Julia, and it's clear Angier is the only one who knows he's innocent, so Cutter begins developing Angier's new show with him. Cutter actually brings in a new assistant named Olivia and explains how effective a pretty assistant can be in distracting an audience during a show. And I mean, it's like a mid-20s ScarJo we're talking about, so he's really bringing it with this idea, honestly. Cutter wants Angier to do a trick with a dove in a cage, much like the others we've seen, but he fits Angier with a bizarre device that straps to his back that has a mechanism that allows for the trick to be done in a less conventional way. Angier finds this version of the trick is much cleaner and more impressive, and it doesn't require him to actually kill the bird like the other versions all seem to. We see Angier doing a show where he does the bird trick, but one of the two volunteers turns out to be Borden, who successfully sabotages the trick and gets Angier and Cutter fired from the 2-week engagement at the venue for bird murder, or murder, if you will. We have another time jump to where Angier is in Colorado to see Tesla, and Allie comes to see him at a bar. He allows Angier to come up the mountain and see one of Tesla's creations. He has managed to electrify lights without the use of wires with a generator that is miles away with alternating current. There is a demonstration of Tesla's alternating current in town, and many in the crowd criticize how dangerous it seems, despite the demonstrator's assurances that it is completely safe. Angier is there at the demonstration, and he spots Borden at the demonstration as well, and resents him for his happy life with his wife and child that he feels Borden took away from him when he, allegedly caused the death of Angier's wife Julia. Finally, Tesla agrees to see Angier at his estate, where Angier asks him to create something for him, but it's not clear exactly what he's asking for. It's kind of kept from the audience in this moment. And Tesla cautions him not to continue with his obsession over this whole thing, but confirms he's already started developing it, so it's kind of like, what's Tesla's deal with even cautioning him? I mean, it's like, I guess he just knows that Angier's not going to give up, and I don't know why Tesla doesn't just, not make it, but I guess it's all part of the movie. It flashes to Olivia finding Angier clearly obsessing over Borden and explaining it away as something magicians just do to keep up with each other. He explains to her that the two of them, following their rating of sabotages, are not really even because Borden has been able to continue on as if nothing happened and have a happy life. Then it cuts to one of Borden's shows where Angier is in the crowd and sees him do his new trick, the transported man. Borden is on stage with two small rooms on either side of the stage with doors on them, and he has an audience member examine a rubber ball and takes it back. Then he steps in front of one door and he bounces the ball toward the other and goes into the room behind him and closes the door. We don't see the trick play out really, but it is believed that Borden somehow comes out the door on the other side and catches the ball. Angier reacts to it by saying it's the greatest magic trick he's ever seen, and Cutter insists, The only way that trick can be done is with a double. I know you want there to be more to it, but it's got to be done with a double, you know? But Angier is convinced it really is Borden going in one door and coming out the other, and there is no double. It's also important that I note this because I haven't done a super good job of illustrating this, but Borden, despite having great skills as a magician, does not do a good enough job of displaying it with showmanship. Angier, though probably a lesser magician, is a great showman, perhaps even the greatest showman. Anywho, Angier wants to steal Borden's trick and make it the climax of his own show. Since Cutter only knows one way to replicate it, he insists that Angier find a convincing double to pull it off, which he somehow conveniently finds a guy named Root, who is clearly Hugh Jackman with slightly different facial hair, drunk in a bar, to hire on as his double. Angier is setting up his version of the trick with a trapdoor and is struggling with the alcoholic Root being drunk all the time and potentially jeopardizing his show with all of his antics. Furthermore, Angier really hates that he has to do the trick the way he does because he spends the prestige standing under the stage, hearing the crowd cheer, and he suggests that Olivia go spy to find out how Borden actually does the original transported man. It flashes back to Colorado, and Tesla demonstrates the device that he made for Angier using a top hat, where the device has a field of electricity focused onto it, but it seemingly doesn't work as intended and tempers flare as Angier questions Tesla about its failure. Olivia shows up to talk to Borden about becoming a part of his act, and he rightfully knows to be suspicious of her. So instead of treating him like a fool, she explains to him that Angier sent her there, and she resents him for even doing it. And of course, Borden knows that Angier is using a double in his version of the transported man, and he's unimpressed by his version of the trick. So Root suddenly realizes he has a great deal of power over the act and decides to blackmail Angier and Cutter to get more compensation for his continued participation in the trick. Cutter relays this turn of events to Angier and tells him that he has to stop doing the trick altogether, but Angier insists on doing it, and it blows up in his face almost immediately as Root makes a mockery of the trick on stage and delays the reveal and essentially ruins the whole trick in this very taunting way. And it's actually revealed that Borden had found Root at a bar and put the idea in his head of using his leverage over Angier to get more money out of them. And of course, Cutter knew as soon as this happened, it was like, yeah, you're never going to be able to pay this guy enough. He knows that he has you over a barrel. You might as well just find a different trick. Shortly after this, Borden once again sabotages Angier's show, but this time more directly by removing the padding from under the trapdoor that Angier falls through and causes him to injure his leg. Then Borden himself ascends to the stage in Root's place and has Root tied up and suspended above the stage as he invites the audience to come see his show across the street and just kind of waltzes out proudly. Angier confronts Olivia for betraying him and improving Borden's act instead of doing what he sent her to do. Olivia reveals that she swiped Borden's diary, which is written in a cipher, but even with the code word, Angier knows that it will take months to decode the whole thing. But he's just so excited by the notion that he has Borden's secrets that he tells Olivia it's all he needs. Olivia kind of points out that none of this will bring back Julia, and in an impulsive response, Angier says he doesn't care about his wife. All he cares about are Borden's secrets, which is, as you can imagine, a pretty damning thing for him to say and makes him look and feel like a complete piece of shit, rightfully so. Angier decides to stage a break-in so Borden won't know that Olivia took the diary, and Olivia admits that she's fallen in love with Borden. Borden discovers his diary is missing and knows that Angier is just getting started. Then, shortly after Borden's show, Angier follows Borden's partner Fallon through the dark streets of the town. Fallon climbs a flight of stairs to a building, but the steps are sabotaged and he falls through them and into a wood box that Cutter immediately nails a lid on top of. Borden and Angier meet, and Angier explains that Fallon wouldn't tell him anything, or even speak really, but they've buried him in the box, and Angier forces Borden to share his secret to the transported man instead of just the code word. And Borden explains that the code word is the secret, and he simply writes Tesla so Angier can decipher the diary. Later on, Cutter argues with Angier that the secret to the trick is the same as he's been saying it is all along, but Angier just wants there to be more to it than just a double. Cutter cautions him that obsession is a young man's game, but Angier is too arrogant to listen and proclaims he is going to travel to America to find Tesla. As Angier reads Borden's diary, Borden explains that he believed Olivia was told by Angier to say everything she did when they met, but Borden keeps seemingly referring to himself as we. Ultimately, we get to see the expanded version of Borden and Olivia's first meeting. She explains to him that she can show him how to help people see his tricks are way better than Angier's. She urges him to show off that he has an injured hand, and that it helps people see he's not using a double. Borden explains that he believes Olivia, but he doesn't know that he can really trust her. As Angier keeps reading the diary, Borden reveals that he instructed Olivia to give Angier his diary deliberately, and that Tesla is just the code word and is not the actual secret to the trick. At the hotel, the man at the desk reveals to Angier that Thomas Edison's men have come and interfered because of Tesla's threat to Edison's endeavors. Angier goes back to Tesla's facility to confront him for taking his money and not making a working machine for him. But Tesla explains that it was not an exact science and that it merely does not work as expected. So, while the top hat they used to demonstrate it did not really disappear, they want to use a cat to see if it yields different results. As they demonstrate on the cat and focus the electricity on it, it appears to still not work. But as Angier goes outside with the cat running ahead of him, another identical cat is seen, and the two cats walk around a pile of top hats that all look like the original used in the first experiment. Angier brings Allie and Tesla out to see what he's found, and Tesla explains that these types of experiments rarely work as expected, and he reminds Angier to take his hat. Angier asks which one of them is actually his, and Tesla explains that they are all his hat, revealing that all the machine had been doing was simply duplicating what was put in front of it without destroying it or transporting it in any way. Borden pleads with Sarah that he only loves her, and the only one that she competes with for his affection is their daughter. When Borden tells her that he loves her, she says it's true today, and then angrily states that it just makes it that much harder at the times when it's not true. Borden sees Olivia, and she tells him that when he's with her, he needs to leave his family at home. Angier returns to the hotel near Tesla's facility that he'd been staying at, and the man at the desk reveals that he did not tell Edison's men about the box when they were seizing Tesla's other devices. Angier asks what box he's talking about, and he finds out that the invention Tesla made for him is still intact on the premises. Tesla left him a note, and it explains that there are instructions on how to use the machine, but he advises that Angier simply destroy it, as it will only bring him misery. Then it flashes back to Borden in his cell as Angier's writing reveals that he too used the diary to mislead Borden, and he reveals that he is likely not actually dead, despite Borden awaiting being hanged for murdering Angier. It's important to note that this movie very deliberately follows in the three acts of its plot the same as those of a magic trick, with the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. Borden confronts Owens and suggests the diary is a fake, but Owens assures him it's authentic and that Owens' employer, who is buying the tricks, is a man named Caldlow. Borden gives Owens his tricks excluding the prestiges for all of them until he can see his daughter and say goodbye. Then it flashes to Sarah getting fed up and saying that she can't live like this, arguing with Borden, and she asks if he loves her, but he tells her not today. Cutter goes to an address he was given where he finds two blind stagehands and Angier, who wants to have Cutter set up one final grand show, with Cutter managing the show from the front of house instead of the back so as to not know how the tricks are actually being done. Angier demonstrates Tesla's machine for the owner of the venue, and despite initial disappointment, he is shocked to find that Angier did disappear and then in fact reappeared behind him, and he proclaims that it is rare to see real magic. Olivia is at lunch with Borden and she criticizes him for being so cold. Then she tells him that Angier is back with what people are calling the greatest trick ever performed. Angier performs his transported man with Tesla's machine, and he allows the audience members to examine the device beforehand. Then he performs the trick, the electrical fields envelop him, and he seemingly disappears only to reappear on a balcony. Borden watches in astonishment. He yells at Fallon about how Angier is not a good magician, but all he can ascertain is that Angier uses a trapdoor and they can't get to the bottom of the trick. They can't figure out how it works. He finds out from Fallon that every night after the show, a large cloaked box is seen being carried out of the venue. And as I mentioned, Angier deliberately does not want Cutter backstage to see how the trick is truly working. At one of the shows, Borden goes on stage not to examine the device, but to actually sneak backstage under the ruse of being a part of the act, which is what we saw at the very beginning of the movie. Cutter sees him go back and chases after him. Borden approaches an empty water tank, and suddenly, at the height of the trick on stage, Angier drops in the tank and it locks shut as he struggles to get out. Borden tries to break the glass with an axe but is unsuccessful. It flashes back to the trial where Borden is found guilty, and Cutter discusses with Owens the remainder of Angier's belongings being purchased by his employer Caldlow. Borden is brought his daughter to say goodbye to her by Caldlow himself, who is revealed to be Angier, alive and well. Angier proclaims that he has won, and Borden angrily states that this isn't a competition and his daughter's life is at stake. Borden desperately offers the secret to his transported man, but Angier tears it apart, proclaiming that his is better, and he leaves Borden to be hanged and takes his daughter with him. Angier comes home to find Cutter, who notices Borden's daughter with him and puts it together who she is. He can't understand how Angier is alive, considering he literally saw him dead and is letting Borden hang for killing him. Angier assures him the machine will be destroyed, and Cutter is visibly angry with him. Borden says a tearful goodbye to Fallon, apologizing for all he's done and what he did with Sarah. As he's being taken away, Borden bounces the ball to him, and Fallon catches it and says goodbye. Angier and Cutter go to dispose of the machine, and this is interspersed with Borden's trial. Cutter reveals that the story that he told at Julia's funeral about the sailor drowning as being like going home was actually a lie, and that the sailor said it was actually pure agony to drown. Angier reacts to the reveal with disdain as it cuts to Borden's hanging. Suddenly, it cuts back to Angier under the stage at the venue, catching a ball bounced to him after Cutter has already left the area. As Angier catches it, the person who bounced it to him shoots him in the chest and walks into the light. And wouldn't you know it, it's Borden. The huge reveal is that Borden's twin brother is Fallon, and the two of them traded off being disguised as either Fallon or Borden. We see a flashback of the twin brothers. The one with the injury from taking the gunshot to the hand is forced to replicate it on the other twin, allowing them to do the transported man trick successfully. They devoted their entire lives to keeping up this ruse, confusing those closest to them. One of them loved Sarah, the other loved Olivia, and although that was enough for the twins, it was not enough for either woman. It actually flashes back to show the first time that Angier used Tesla's machine and it duplicated him in the same room, and the duplicate immediately shot the original Angier. Angier desperately tried to convince Borden it took great sacrifice to do what he did, but Borden is unconvinced because Angier only ever tried to steal Borden's tricks. Angier tries to convince him to see evidence of his sacrifice, but Borden is just unwilling. Angier finally collapses from the gunshot wound, and his lantern starts a fire around him as Borden slowly walks away. We again hear Cutter's monologue from the beginning about the 3 acts of a magic trick as Angier lays there dying. Borden returns to reunite with his daughter, and Cutter has been performing the disappearing bird trick for her. It flashes to Borden when he turns back to look at the dark room, and it's revealed that all of the water tanks were being used by Angier to drop himself into the tanks with the trapdoor as the duplicate appears on the stage and the original drowns inside the locked tank in agony. And then we roll credits. Okay, so only a little bit of trivia for this one. The editing included 146 time jump cuts in which the next shot either flashes back or skips ahead to another time period of the storyline. This averages to more than one timeline jump per minute of the movie. This is one of 3 2006 movies to feature magic and magicians as main characters. The other 2 are The Illusionist from 2006 with Ed Norton and Paul Giamatti, I believe, and Scoop from 2006, which also starred Hugh Jackman and Scarlett Johansson. I have never heard of that movie ever before, and those 2 people were big enough names that I'm surprised I haven't at least heard of that. Maybe I recognize the poster or something. Sam Mendes initially wanted to adapt this story to film as a follow-up to the Oscar-winning film American Beauty, but basically it just didn't work out, and Christopher Nolan took over. All right, on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, 14.8 million. Worldwide gross, 109.7 million. IMDb rating, 8.5. Letterboxd rating, 4.3. Rotten Tomato critics score, 77%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 92%. Personal rating, 5 out of 5 stars. Praise for this movie. It requires your full attention and pays off in the best ways if you give it. The performances and overall story are so perfectly delivered that the first time you watch it, it most likely will just blow you away and you'll feel like you missed a ton of stuff. It's incredibly well paced and keeps you guessing at every turn. For criticism, there are pretty much no monster trucks in this film at all. All right, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Review, a method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews. What you hoped you would see is half blind with hats tied, with all the dates of release for Footloose, The Dark Knight, a Kurt Russell brain freeze, Rear Windows and Gaslights. I'm Billy and your Meg, Sharon Stone, the leg spread. The part starts with the eggs, you won't stop till you're dead. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.